Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, or hopefully by this time it will be formally transferred over to Garden of Thought, but on the off chance it's not yet, you're still in the right place. And we have a returning guest, a retired Professor Michael York. He is a friendly acquaintance of mine. Maybe we can be friends at this point. Going back to the Nephilim Anthropology Conference, he does some teaching with Cherry Hill Seminary, but he's a retired professor from a couple of universities in Europe that I either can't pronounce or they're too long for me to speak on. But he is going to speak on today. He has an expertise in Indo-European myths and culture, and some of that intersects with a lot of other sort of Near East and Northern African. I don't know what's the chicken and the egg, and I'm not sure anyone will ever find out. But loosely, we're going to be covering what I would call Canaanite mythology, Canaanite panoplies, pantheons. Choose whichever word you like. Probably includes a lot of familiar terms like Canaanite, like Israelite, maybe Hittite, probably Akkadian, Babylonian maybe in there, maybe some others. So without further ado, Professor Michael York, welcome back into the garden, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, absolutely. So clean up whatever I botched there in the introduction.
There's nothing to clean up. You're right about the uncertainties of all these different influences, and all right. And let me just start with the Indo-European briefly. As I understand it, the Indo-Europeans basically personified the natural elements, the elements of nature: sun, moon, dawn, earth, the light of the heavens, and so forth. And they had an understanding of divinity as both being positive and negative, kind of the negative aspects of nature. But in contrast to both the positive and negative divine, they had an understanding of what we might call the anti-divine. And whether the Levant itself, the Semites of the Levant, shared that same idea, that's what's questionable. there seems to have been an interplay, and we know that, well, like with Israel, there's a very, very strong interplay between Persia, the Zoroastrian setup, Zarathustra, but basically what Zarathustra did was he took the whole Indo-European paradigm of gods and anti-gods and inverted the whole process. And in that inversion thing, he took what was considered kind of an anti-god entity, the Asuras in India or Vedic mythology, and exalted it into Ahura Mazda. And when the Persians had conquered Israel, well, I guess actually originally it was the Babylonians that conquered Israel, and then a lot of them were exiled into Babylon. When the Persians then conquered Babylon, they related to the Jews and the Israelites and identified the Israeli God, their Yahweh, with their Ahura Mazda. And they're the ones that actually then let the Israelites and the Jews go back to Palestine. So we have that kind of thing. But earlier, of course, the story is that Abraham made this covenant with Yahweh, and I guess he and his people then conquered Canaan or Palestine. But there were lots of Canaanite gods, and a lot of the Jews originally, as we see in the Old Testament, honored these entities. And so there was a whole growing monotheistic development that the prophets, the Israeli prophets, were condemning that worship, and that was considered wrong and anathema and so forth. And Yahweh is declared saying that I'm a jealous God and I'm the only God, and all the other entities are demons. So that's what we're working against. Now, if we look at the Canaanite pantheon, the head god is El, E-L, and that's the figure that the Israeli Yahweh was tended to be identified with. In Canaanite mythology, El is kind of I don't know if passive is the right word, but he's already being replaced by a younger, more dynamic, and more fertility-oriented deities. That would be Baal. Baal's name actually means Lord. But you develop a kind of an antithesis between the immediate children of El and El himself and his spouse Ashura. In Canaanite, she was known as Atharat. In the Old Testament, she's known as, that name is translated into Ashura. She's repeatedly considered or several times she's named as the spouse of El, and even as the spouse of Yahweh in a couple of texts.
Yeah.
So you have this, and of course the word for God, the other word other than Yahweh in the Old Testament is Elohim. Well, Elohim is plural of El, and basically the Elohim would consist of El, Ashura, and the god Yam, who's the god of the sea, and Mat, who's the god of death.
So you sort of have your Zeus, Poseidon, Hades kind of dynamic there.
I wouldn't put it that way, no, because Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon they're the divisions of the natural world, and the Elohim, as I understand them, are kind of reflexes or similar paradigms to the anti-gods of the Indo-European construct. So the gods themselves would be the Baalim, the children of Baal, or the associates of Baal. And that includes his sister Anat. Dagon is he's a god of harvest and crops. He's one of the ones that's mentioned, I think, in the Old Testament.
Isn't he like a merman kind of thing?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we don't know very much about him. Sometimes Baal is considered the son of El, but he's also considered the son of Dagon. And I think that would probably be, it conforms more to the kind of detectable antagonism between the Elohim and the Baalim. We have Astarte, who's kind of a counterpart of Ishtar, the Akkadian Babylonian goddess of love and fertility. She's more ambiguous. Sometimes she's linked with the Baalim, and sometimes she's considered an offspring of El as well.
Is she where Aphrodite came from? Because Aphrodite was sort of imported into Western.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I got that one right. That's good. Yeah, when you talk about El being sort of passive, or more private, that's sort of similar with some of the Eastern. Actually, it's sort of similar period. I mean, Norse, you have Bur and Buri, and we barely hear about them at all, and Anu in Vedic India, and we barely hear about him. We just, Uranus was a little bit more involved, but once things went bad for Uranus, he sort of pieced out and took his place in the heavens and was the heavens, looking around but not getting involved any longer. And that's I think it also happened in Egypt. Like, isn't there like Amun but Ra? They're sort of the same, but they're not exactly.
Dynasty, that's true, and he's a strange one too. He is fused ultimately with the sun god Re, and so it becomes Amun-Re. But the earlier figures would be the sun god, Thoth, the moon god, and Osiris and Isis and Horus.
Yeah.
But Amun kind of then, at a much later point, takes over, and kind of in the same way that Yahweh or El takes over in Canaan and Israel.
Yeah, I mean, one of the commandments, it might be the second one, is "There shall be no other gods before me." And I grew up Reform Jewish, and I'm so bad at being Jewish that it took until my first marriage, my ex-father-in-law, who's since deceased, he would ask, they were conservative, but they were pretty religious conservative. And he asked me what I was, and when I said, we're Reformed, and he said, there is no Reformed. You're Reform. It's Reform. I didn't even know that my sect or denomination was Reform, not Reformed. That's how bad I was at this. But I do remember, they were really mad about the golden calf. They were really mad about false idols. There is no other God before me. And I just say it was silly kid stories, whatever. You listen, you memorize it, you get a B- on the test at Hebrew school. Who cares? You go to bar mitzvahs, you get your cash and prizes. The end. But it was until I listened to like a podcast but the hosts are two Eastern Orthodox priests, I guess, from the deep south in the U.S. talking about it. And they said, listen, if you really want to look at the whole Testament, it's mostly about the Israelites letting down God because they're worshiping false idols and other gods, and they're battling giants. and that like hit me like a bolt of lightning. I'm like, oh my Yahweh, that makes a whole lot, that does clear a whole lot up, and it sort of plays into sort of a lot of the cultural divide going on now. But we're not here necessarily to talk about now, but just wanted to give a little bit of my background and how I came to even stumble upon this journey, so to speak.
I mean, I probably have similar stories to that, but I stumbled on it all too. And in my case, I mean, I was in San Francisco. It was the wonderful Haight-Ashbury days of the counterculture, and I think it was came across. I visited someone, and he, of course, had this book on his coffee table by Margaret Murray, and it was really like a plant. And of course, I picked it up and immediately started leafing through it. Well, we ended up deciding that we were going to form a coven, and when the whole psychiatric ward that my wife worked in was suddenly, because the psychiatric ward couldn't handle all the latest ideas that they were coming back with, they were all on unemployment. And every time any one of us would go to any type of an event, we were all there. So we bonded and identified, and suddenly we had our coven. And so we met in Golden Gate Park on Strawberry Hill, and we put together a whole, I think at the beginning we were kind of very anti-Christian, so we used a satanic metaphor to begin with. We evolved away from that, but in that process we then kind of developed a pagan identity, and that's where we concluded it with. Paganism, of course, is a hard thing to understand, but it shouldn't really be, because it's really it's understanding divinity as a plurality, not as a single entity, and certainly not as a jealous single entity. And it sees the elements of nature as interacting and being the source of life. And so it's a way of venerating or honoring and respecting those elements of nature and trying to work with them. And that's basically how I would understand paganism. And in contrast to our Abrahamic religions, which are fairly similar in many respects, they all have variations. I have a very negative understanding of Yahweh, and I see it as a factional, divisive, anti or an operative, non-existent entity. I know it's a weird concept, but if you look at the Abrahamic religions, they're about as divisive as they can be, and they all conflict and fight with one another, let alone fighting with other religions that are non-Abrahamic. But that seems to be the consequence of that type of an entity that it's focused on. So if you take the Elohim vis-a-vis the Baalim, and Baal was basically the god, a storm god of fertility, the god of rain, of growth, of production.
Is that Baal Hadad? Is that the full name, Baal Hadad? Hadad?
Yes, because there's Balaam is actually, the name means Lord, and it's applied to several different figures, and Hadad is one of them. And I think, he's kind of ultimately, I think he's applied even to the Mesopotamian Marduk at some point.
Yeah, I think they get interchanged. I think Marduk sort of supplants Hadad, in the local belief, whether it's a cognate or not. And I'm sure, scholars can differ on that. Right. One interesting thing strikes me is that sort of, it seems to have started with Zoroastrianism, moved its way over to what we call Judaism now, sort of solidified in Christianity, but you took sort of the spirits, you sort of went from, there's a duality, there's good and evil, and there's the good god or gods, and then there's the lesser gods that are, and they're in some sort of equivalency. Then you went to, let's Yahweh, Yel, whatever, God, let's just use the word God, one singular God that is, and the others sort of became non-divine, but demons, and of course God had his angels, which were, immortal beings that are, somehow with powers that are not considered gods, but they're immortal with powers and can mate with women, human women, just like other gods too. But we'll skip that for a moment. And then in Christianity, you sort of have the gentle supplanting of Son over Father. I mean, there's still the Father and the Holy Ghost, but I've been to a bunch of Christian churches. I've never seen an image of God now or a Holy Ghost. I see, Jesus on the cross. Now, I know we're not supposed to be able to look upon the face of God. It's too spectacular or dangerous to see, and so you can't possibly recreate it. But it's mostly Jesus, and I know that there's paintings of God and passing the torch and things like that. And then Islam sort of took it back and say, "Now this is God. There's God and there's prophets that God likes better than those. And yeah, we've got angels and we've got jinn, but there's only God. And you Christians, you took it a little bit too far." But the bigger point I'm trying to make, because I'm sure there's tons of stuff there that smarter people than me can parse apart correctly, is that it seems to me around the time that part of the world had moved into cities, city-states, more agriculture, that you needed, instead of having chieftains or clan leaders, you sort of needed kings, and kings sort of needed divinity, and the divinity came from an all-powerful God, and those two things, like our culture and the all-powerful king of the gods, sort of evolved or developed together in parallel.
I think that's a good point. And
yes.
There is that idea that as we became more urbanized, the gods of agriculture became more marginal, and that could have been part of what was going on there. Probably the most negative Canaanite figure would be what's known as Moloch.
Yes.
And we don't really know very much about him. He was condemned for requiring a sacrifice of children. And I don't know where that really came from and how real that really was, but that's how the Old Testament has it. Moloch is probably Melkart, who was a Syrian god, or Moloch, who was an Ammonite god. But the name itself seems to mean king. And so as you were consolidating the kingship of God, you had both the Yahweh figure and perhaps this anti-reflection, which was the Moloch figure. And Abraham kind of undergoes the same thing with Yahweh, because Yahweh at first says he demands the sacrifice of Abraham's firstborn son. And just as Abraham is about to do that, Yahweh steps in and says, "Ha ha, I was only kidding and testing you." And but the fact was that of course Abraham was willing to do that in this his understanding of what this figure was and demanded. And so there's kind of a parallel that was supposedly the way that Yahweh was showing that he was not Moloch, that he was abandoning that idea of sacrifice.
And listen, how much painting the bad guys, the others, as ones that eat babies and demand sacrifice is nothing new, and it gets rehashed time and time again, including, well, we're in 2025 and it's still there in the background. So, no one can find these eaten children. Nobody can find all these parents that are complaining about it. I know they've been paid off by the Davos 300 or whatever, because there's hundreds of trillions of dollars, out there in secret banks that we don't know about. I get it, but that's that's like a really old way of othering is, the bad guy gods, the bad guy king, they eat babies and they want your babies too. And if you want to be on the good side, be like me, worship me. Don't be like a Moloch worshiper because he's going to eat your babies.
I agree. I don't know how much in the background that all is. I mean, if you look at, if we want to get political, we can look at what's happening in Gaza right now and the number of babies that are getting sacrificed on that score. And it seems like it's a continuation of this Moloch Yahweh confederation.
I thought you were going to go with Margorie Taylor Green. I don't know if I'm relieved or not, but it's all
right. Explain her to me. How you see her?
Oh, CrossFit is doing great things for the body, not necessarily the soul or the brain. I think I'll leave it at that. But there's that wing of, most notably the Republican Party, though they wouldn't have been Republicans 15 or 20 years ago, that, is totally buy into the QAnon stuff. And at the root of the QAnon stuff is that, demonic forces, satanic forces are trying to steal babies and eat them. And, and I think I'll say this, is that it's saying, they're white babies and they're white Christian babies, and that's that's weakening the whiteness of America, which the funny thing is all of the original Americans are from Asia. I mean, which is but anyway, I don't know that it was ever supposed to be a whiteness, even by the primarily white founders. I mean, this is like some new myth. Anyway, we're not talking about new myths, we're talking about old myths, but feel free to comment on that because guest privileges, you can talk about whatever you like.
I'm just baffled by what's happening in America, but not just America, but the world itself. And if you look at the Abrahamic religions, that's slightly more than half the world's population. And I see it more like a disease, like it's a malignant disease. And I think if we could free ourselves from that, and I'm not quite sure how we could do that, but if we get back to more secular, pagan, even dharmic understandings. The dharmic, I'm a little critical because it's really kind of anti-terrestrial, anti-life. It's more transcendental again, kind of like the Abrahamic faiths. But all the same, there's something more positive with the other half of the world's population in spiritually thinking. And I would think that if we could kind of reground ourselves with that understanding of nature, the honoring of nature, the veneration of nature, whatever we want to call it, which includes both our environment, our earth, and humanity, we'd have a more possibly solid foundation for intercooperation and harmony. And I don't find the Abrahamic religions contribute to that. So that's where I am.
Well, they definitely don't. They express, and I'm not even sure it even started with them, because I think they sort of, they have been interpreted to be basically God made humans first, and the earth is there for humans to dominate. So we're here, animals are here for our pleasure, everything's here for our pleasure. It went from we're supposed to husband the earth and husband the trees to this is all for you, and multiply, and be fruitful and multiply. This is all for you. So whatever you're doing to it, don't worry. The ultimate excuse, this is part of God's plan. He'll take care of the earth. Don't worry about it because he made this for us. And if you accept one leap of faith where you're going to, sacrifice your child. And I mean, you don't end up not having to, and they'll take a goat instead. Quite a trade. But well, I guess maybe 4,000 years ago that was maybe more of an even trade than we conceive of today. I mean, it's probably the same as trading a pile of gold bullion today. But as far as wealth is concerned, but in any event, it's a bit of a mess. But it is there is that the earth is your playground. It was created for you, and you are like me. You're in my image. Don't worry. It's whatever you want to do with it is cool.
Well, on top of that, of course, then Yahweh gives that Palestine land to the Israelites. Not overlooking the fact that there were other people there already, and that's where the whole idea of decimation comes in. They were the Ammonites, the rest of them were. They were to be wiped. Moabites, I guess. They all were supposed to be wiped out, and that's kind of that whole syndrome. That's what's the rationale and justification to what's going on today. It's understandable when you look at what happened with the Holocaust. But the idea of then reasserting this land right when other people were living there as they had been originally, we were really kind of replaying out that same kind of syndrome. And if God makes the earth for us, but God made the Palestine for the Israelis. And so that becomes already something divisive vis-a-vis the rest of humanity. And
the war was much smaller then, at least to the people who were writing.
Yes. I mean, now we have internet and jet planes and all kinds of interconnections, and so we're on a much, much bigger scale and a more globally interactive scale, of course. But again, if you look at the Old Testament, who was Baal basically having to contest against? It was both Mot, the god of death, the desert, and the underworld, and Yam, the drowning sea. And they're both kind of reflexes of this El figure to begin with. They're his two chief children, and he's the one that promotes them in the battle with Baal. Baal actually is successful because of his sister's assistance, Anat, who was the goddess of hunting and actually warfare. She's kind of a prototype of Artemis, the Greek Artemis. She's a virginal goddess, but she's one of the Balaam. And it's through the assistance of the female that Balaam is successful with these anti-divine entities. And so, but of course, in time, Baal becomes transformed into the demon, as you put it. It becomes Beelzebub, is known as the Lord of the Flies. Several other manifestations as well, but it's all there to be read, and it's all there in a way that seems to play out with the human psyche. I don't think in the most favorable way, but I think we have to become or make ourselves aware of how our history has played out and how we can reorient it in directions which are more favorable and more conducive to harmony and intercooperation.
So now there's the Baal cycles or cycle, and I believe it's 7 tablets, which maybe is where the whole 7 things started from. I don't know, or probably 7 started somewhere else, but sort of
it's a magical number. So and it seems to appear everywhere.
Yeah. and the Baal cycles are, I guess, as old as it gets, except for Gilgamesh. I don't remember if there were any sevens in that. I know the story of Inanna. She goes through 7 gates when she goes to the underworld. You know, I know that there's the 7 wanderers. That's one of the theories. You know, some people just like, it's the phases of the moon. It's close enough. You know, I'm not sure about all that. Each one makes sense. I mean, the 7 wanderers, I guess, is the only one that makes sense universally. But again, I'm not sure if that mystery will ever completely be solved. I'm sure there's people on all schools of thought that can make compelling arguments, whatever way they go. But the Baal cycle is after the epic of Sumerian writing was before the Babylonian writing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Sumerian, we're not really talking about Canaanite for Sumerian, though. I'm not going to ignore that some of the characters have the same names and some of the motifs and you know may have been borrowed, and probably some came from India and other places as well, because that's just the way myth goes. We beg, borrow, and steal and alter things. I mean, when we were talking about, you know, that the Baal Hadad was, you know, the good guy to, you know, let's just say the Babylonians or the Akkadians, and Yahweh was the bad guy. Yahweh is the good guy to the Israelites, just like probably in the 1850s, Andrew Jackson was the good guy to the Americans, but not the good guy to the Native Americans. And now, as we look back in history, you know, Andrew Jackson, you know, I mean, going back, whatever, 4.5 to 5 decades when I'm learning about Andrew Jackson in elementary school, hero on the $20 bill. Now you learn about Andrew Jackson, not so much hero. You know, very, very, very much the opposite in a lot of ways.
Previously, probably the worst president until we got a replacement on that score. But that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
That's what I've heard too. So, you know, that's what the streets are saying, as the kids tell me. All right, we should probably stick though to the topic at hand and go back. You know, I mean, right. Is it like 4,000 years? What is? I mean, I know you can't set this in stone unless it is set in stone, literally. What is the time period of the Canaanite gods from, you know, whichever one you want to start with? I'll guess is the oldest.
All right. Go back to your Sumerians. I mean, they already had you had Enlil, whatever. I think that's Enlil is the air god, the god of air, who replaces Anu.
Right.
But there's already a kind of a duality or an antagonism, not strictly a polarity, between Enki, who's the earth-oriented and water god, as opposed to this more sterile Enlil figure. So you already have that kind of antagonism, which then is reinterpreted in Akkadian and Babylonian, the Semite mythology, that then the Semites take over from the Sumerians. And that's a similar kind of dichotomy that we find between the Elohim and the Baalim in Canaan. We find it in other cultures as well, but it's a time-wise, I'm not sure when the Canaanites, how far back we go. The Israeli texts seem to be about 700, 600 BCE. But how much earlier were the Israelis really in that area? They put it back to more, I forget. I know the Indo-Europeans or the Vedic literature was basically written about maybe 1500 BCE, more likely 1200 BCE. At least that's when it probably got written down. The Canaanite roots could probably be about the same time, but of course the scriptures weren't written until much, much later.
Right. And Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, was written about 4,000 years ago or 6,000? Is it 4,000 BC? I get those confused.
I don't think he's that early. I think at most about 2000 BC.
Okay, so about 4,000 years ago, written now. Again, the story probably is older, and what's written down probably isn't the original version, though. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, and I think Enlil and Enki, I think, is their mom Tiamat, who's sort of like the sea, and she becomes a sea dragon, and I don't know if she's the original sea dragon, but maybe...
Yeah, she's as original as we know, and she's kind of like the anti-mother, because once the gods exist, she doesn't like the noise they're making, and so she tries to destroy them. So she's actually, it's again a female personification of this anti-divine chaos, entropy, emptiness, whatever you want to call it. And so you have the hero god, Ninurta, earlier, and probably Enlil, but then ultimately Marduk, who then conquers her and becomes the creator in the fact that he divides her body up into the heavens and the earth. But and we have similar things in Greek, Asiatic mythology, and so forth. She's a complex figure, but she seems to be basically a personification of the sterile, non-fertile sea in origin.
Saltwater, then.
Yeah.
Isn't there another god, like she has a brother who is the fresh waters, that plays a...
Enki is where he actually comes from, we don't know. Enki and Ea, he's the freshwater, and he's the fertility figure, and he's the one that ultimately is in contrast to Enlil as the god of the atmosphere. But Enlil is kind of an equivalent of Uranus.
Yeah, and now these days people say Enlil is Satan, which I don't know where they get from. I mean, Enki is the one who warned whoever the guy was who survived the flood, that the flood was coming, by basically speaking really loudly behind a house when he knew that the other guy was like fishing or something. And I always forget his name. It's like Ishpanusheth or something.
Yes, I can't.
I don't expect you to remember it either, but it's I always get it wrong. So
he meets him. He gets to his island where he's immortal.
Right.
Ushnum or something like that.
Right. And he's supposed to be Noah, but instead of Noah, he's like, yeah, you can't be immortal. Get out of here. And then Gilgamesh sort of turns into Beowulf at the end, like swimming around, like trying to kill dragons in the sea and losing or something. I don't know. It's a very interesting story. I mean, if you read enough stories or hear enough, that you draw parallels, and some are correct and some are going to be wrong. Especially me. I mean, you've studied this your whole professional life, so you're going to get more right than I am.
I could get more wrong because I have my own ideas of it.
That's okay. Listen, this is just a podcast, so there's no tenure here. You can spill whatever ideas you have on you like. Especially if we're running out of god names and sort of myths, because I'm sure that the actual stories besides Inanna's descent into the underworld and sort of the Baal cycles, it's probably sort of sparse as to this. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm not sure that even as, again, a bad Reform Jew, that I'm not even sure that I knew Yahweh was supposed to be the name of God. I don't think I got that from my temple. I think I think I got that from outside sources who told me, and it's and the same letters are the ones that form Jehovah. So I guess it's just how you pronounce letters and language drift. Some people like Yahweh is the devil, Yahweh is the demiurge or the bad guy, but if Yahweh is also Jehovah, how does that make sense?
Well, Jehovah is a derivative of Yahweh, and it's and actually we're not supposed to say Yahweh.
Yeah, we did.
Jehovah was kind of a way around not saying Yahweh, but saying Jehovah, or at least that's how it became more in the West. But I don't know if
you can't say his name. You can't look upon his face. This is a pretty distant God with a lot of rules that aren't so. I mean, you got to really believe in someone. You can't say his name. You can't see his face. You can't behold him without being burned to ashes. You're gonna kill your firstborn.
It's a very, very clever creation or development or whatever.
I mean, I guess it was a cruel world, right? It was a harsh world with harsh rules.
To me, I call it an operative non-existence, and that acronym says one. And there's your whole monotheistic concept right in that. And because existence itself is binary, it's got a light and a dark, it's got a positive and a negative, and so your Baal cycle and what you're referring to is essentially the cycles of nature. We have it with Persephone, we have it with Inanna going through the underworld. It's the idea that there's a winter, spring, summer, fall, and then it just keeps cycling around. That's nature.
Wasn't Inanna rescuing, didn't Baal fail in his first attempt at fighting maybe Marduk or maybe Tiamat? And
yes, and then she becomes Ishtar, and she's trying to rescue her Adonis figure, what's his name? Tammuz. And again, you have this dying rising lord. Cyrus is another one of them. Dionysus is one of them. And in
Jesus, sort of. Jesus, Jesus, he also dies and goes to the underworld and stuff like that.
Zeus doesn't necessarily go to the underworld, but he gets incapacitated. He loses his sinews.
And Heracles also, I mean, he went to the underworld and then later, under some stories anyway, was elevated. So, I mean, again, it's a motif, not a parallel.
Right. They're all different developments of kind of a basic cycle of nature.
Now I know that there are scholars who disagree, and it's probably very important to them that it was first Egyptian or was first Sumerian or was first Babylonian. I don't, right here, I don't really care which was first or not, because I think it's impossible to know anyhow. I actually think that whatever the first story is that was sort of similar to this probably is much, much earlier and came from much, much further south on the same continent as Egypt. But it's not provable, and then nothing else is unprovable. So
right.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't aliens or Atlantis, though.
I'm not sure about that, but
okay. Wait. Which one? Or I guess you could thread the needle where it's both. But which one is that? I'm okay with the aliens. We're very alien friendly here.
Well, I mean, that's. Who goes into all that? The aliens.
Who doesn't? Eric von Däniken is probably the most famous.
Yes. But in a sense, the Yahweh figure almost does seem like an alien that has imposed some type of a jurisdiction over as much of the planet as it has been able to succeed in doing. So I don't know if it's really an alien, but I think I know it was an Indo-European concept, and it seems you find reflections of it, at least with the Semites and maybe with some other peoples as well. This kind of anti-divine, this kind of personifying the ultimate void, out of which Earth is a counter-reflex. And so you always have this ultimate duality, even antagonism between the terrestrial and not the celestial, but the void, the abyss, the cosmic emptiness.
Yeah, I'm very excited. In a few weeks, I'm having J.J. Johnson on again from Southern Demonology. And I've had him on the show like 4 or 5 times. And the one thing we haven't talked about yet is demons, because he is a ridiculously learned and intelligent person that knows. He speaks Ge'ez, he reads Coptic, he reads Old Hebrew. It's like, so I've had so much to talk. He lived in Japan for 9 years. So the first thing I had him on was Shintoism. I mean, which, by the way, there's parallels there too. But I was supposed to have Dr. Heather Lynn on, and like there's 2 times she sort of bounced or had to reschedule, and then she sort of disappeared. And I want to have her on too, again, to go about demons, because I know that JJ disagrees with Dr. Lynn about certain demons, or maybe all aspects of which, but so many of the demons that we talk about today come from like that part of the world, the former gods who have become demons, the shaitan, who maybe is the word for Satan, maybe not, the Pazuzu from the Exorcist, Payman from Hereditary. I mean, all these are like old Babylonian, gods. And like you said, Baal became Beelzebub, and somewhere along the line, people say in Enoch, maybe Belial was also Baal, the fallen angel, and yes. Which I love, because I'm all about the Watchers things. So which is I mean, sort of where you were going. So the whole Anunnaki Sumerian thing is sort of, these gods were extraterrestrial sort of governors of areas, and then one wanted supremacy over them all. It's a very Game of Thrones thing. They're just stronger, more powerful than we are, so they appear as gods. I mean, it's a very appealing story. It's just like, why would they have sort of pieced out for the last 2 to 4,000 years, and not sort of, they had plenty of time to, make themselves known and take over, and probably do a better job than we would have.
That's one way of looking at it. But don't underestimate the fact that, humanity is incredibly imaginative and creative. And all these concepts that we're talking about, whether demons, angels, deities, or whatnot, they all become root elements for different elaborations, and different cultures, different times, different places. They all develop these into wonderful, rich mythologies and legends and stories. And so we have a whole panoply of, they all kind of vary. They have certain roots in common, certain elements, but they are, we can only really approach it through kind of understanding the fluidity, the basic fluidity that runs through all these different elements, and understand that sometimes they manifest this way, sometimes they manifest another way, sometimes they're conflictual, sometimes they're harmonious, but they're all, in a sense, affirmations and even celebrations of human ingenuity and imagination. And I don't think there's a right interpretation of any one thing over another. They all become attestations of this human propensity for development.
We probably don't have time to go through the Inanna aspect story, but there's a few parts of it that are sort of my favorites. So, one, apparently there's not just one, but 2 demons on either side of each of the 7 gates that guard it. So there's 4 demons there at each one, and at each portal, she's got to sort of recite why she's being there. And there's like a poem that gets repeated every time. But it's like strip poker. She has to. So if you think you're a perv now, don't feel so bad, because everybody was a perv and they always have been. Because she has to lose an article of clothing every time, and by the time she gets to gate 7, she's naked. I mean, of course, she's a goddess, but she has to, I guess, humble herself before. I think it was a goddess of death also.
Ereshkigal, yes, yeah. Ereshkigal, the goddess of the underworld. But
but
she succeeds. She succeeds.
Sure.
Ultimately.
Well, I guess what Aristotle saw pleased her, because as I understand it, Inanna, who eventually turned into Aphrodite, was, I don't know, let's just say the Megan Fox of her time. I mean, or insert whoever you like, Salma Hayek, Halle Berry, whatever. For me, 1970 Raquel Welch can't be beat. But it's and if she's listening to my show and she's not, well, A, my wife, B, Morgan freaking Fairchild, one of my mutual follows on Twitter, my most famous. I also have Heather Thomas, but Morgan Fairchild's probably somewhat more famous, and definitely early 80s crush for young Jeffrey. That would be me, but yeah. So Linda Carter will not mutual me. She was on there also. I was looking to get my at least some type of route, Mount Rushmore, and Morgan Fairchild and Heather Thomas would count. Linda Carter would be a solid number 3. Number 4 I'd be willing to negotiate on. But I can't get to 3, so I certainly can't get to 4.
All right, I would say Maryland, of course, would be my number 1, and then Lana Turner, and then Elizabeth Taylor. But I'm not sure about 4. But
who was the one who said come up and shimmy Mae West? What about her? Or Jane Mansfield, Audrey Hepburn, classic.
Yeah, and they're all fabulous. And again, I mean, why have just one when we have a whole panoply of them?
I know this whole Mount Rushmore thing is a sickness. There's no reason to sell for. You're exactly right. So I saw when I was doing my very brief recitation of Inanna, you made a facial expression that led me to believe that you want to interject something there, which is more than welcome.
No, I can't remember now what that was.
Was it the 2 demons on either side of each gate?
I don't remember those 2 demons. I just know that she had to keep stripping.
Well, it was 4 if you count 2 on each side of the gate. But maybe that's embellishment as time goes on.
I think that's an embellishment. But again, it's one of those wonderful created myths that they're colorful. And then they become interesting, and they give you all kinds of angles and things to reflect on, and that's where the real spiritual creativity is. It is the person who reads these things and then is triggered to reflect on them, and at different times, a different element's going to speak to someone and trigger them in a certain direction. But it's all there. It's rich and is to be savored and explored as one can and as one develops and has the time and insight for it.
Do you want to hear my very discount version of why I think that the Egyptian story is actually older than the Babylonian?
All right, yes.
Okay. So I have seen in the last 5 years of doing the show that the older you go, the more the sacred feminine, the sacred mother, Mother Earth, Gaia, Rhea, whatever, seems to have a more prominent role. There's more of an equal power dynamic between male and female, if not female having dominant. And when Isis goes down to the underworld, she sort of tricks. She sort of outthinks the god of the underworld. Again, I forget the name of that. Is it Set or no?
Well, Set's the one that killed her husband.
Right. Is it Anubis?
There's a god of the underworld. There must be, but I can't think of who that would be.
Well, they have several. The Egyptians were so administrative. They have like 5 gods for everything, every step in the way. They had the giant hippopotamus that sort of gets you there. Anyway.
Could be Sebek, but Sebek is the crocodile god, and he has a lot of underworld associations.
But Isis sort of tricks them into like getting on the track of bringing Osiris back, whereas Inanna has to sort of get naked and humble herself, and that seems like a more male kind of thing. So I think that's why, again, that's my dime store reason why I think the Egyptian is older than the Babylonian.
All right.
I told you it's dime store.
I think they're kind of parallel. They sort of developed roughly at the same time, separately.
Mm-hmm.
ultimately then had contact. But but the strange thing with the Egyptian thing is that the sky is male and the earth, say it the way around. The sky is
female,
female, and the earth is male.
Yeah,
and so and we don't really inherit that dichotomy. We inherit the Mesopotamian one.
It's true. Is there any relationship between the Canaanite writ large? I don't care if it's Israeli, Babylonian, Akkadian, Syrian, Moabite, whatever, mythos, and sort of what's been known as the Sea Peoples and or the Minoans, because I believe the Minoans had a matriarchal godhead as well. The Sea Peoples, I have no idea. People say they had their own gods, but nobody even can tell me what the Sea People are, other than, people who might have originally come from what's Greece now, but settled other places and then went all over the place.
One possibility with the Sea Peoples is that they were the displaced Minoans after the volcano exploded. And so they relate to not the Hittites, but the Babylonians, also in Asia Minor. They went to Egypt as what were they called? In the Middle Kingdom. They seem to have gone to Palestine as the Philistines, and they may have also been the Etruscans. So they seem to, their origin seems to be Minoan. They had a very strong female understanding of divinity, and they then become the enemies of the Israelis in Palestine. The Israelis never are able to really conquer them. Ultimately, I think they just become absorbed.
Didn't David kill that Goliath with a slingshot? Although he had 5 brothers, which apparently all had 6 toes and fingers.
I've heard that one too.
I'm not sure if that's in the book, though.
But even David's conquering of Goliath, the Philistines were still there. Israelites, there's no evidence that they were ever finally conquered by the Jews.
Oh, well, maybe tomorrow. Anyway, so it's... and I didn't use the word Phoenicians because apparently these peoples never called themselves the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians have sort of been, an acronym that's been put on them afterwards as sort of there was no group that said, we are the Phoenicians. I mean, and I guess Phoenix was a city in Egypt or Libya. I'm not really sure.
I don't know if it was a city. The phoenix, of course, is the bird that kills itself and then rises up from its own ashes. Right. So it's again one of those cyclical things. But with the Phoenicians or the Canaanites, I mean, we're really dependent on the stelae that were discovered in Ugarit, which I think is in northwest Syria, if not actually in Lebanon itself. But that's where we get most of the Canaanite mythic understandings.
The Ugaritic texts, I believe, is the term that people might be familiar with. So if you didn't know what that was before, he just told you. and that has the Baal cycle on it, and all that.
Yes.
And these are all clay tablets or stone tablets that I think they're baked clay that we've interpreted. Now, I don't know if you know anything about this, but apparently there's Akkadian tablets, and we apparently have never been able to translate this version of Akkadian, the language, and they ran it through AI, which translated it. Now, of course, since we were not able to translate it, I don't know that we have any idea whether the AI translated successfully, but have you seen or heard about the translation? And if so, I know if your first answer is no, the second is going to be moot. But if so, does it at least sound right to you?
I didn't follow that completely. What
the artificial intelligence translation of previously untranslated Akkadian texts?
I didn't think there were untranslated Akkadian texts. They pretty much they're incomplete texts. I mean, because a lot of the tablets are broken, and so there's missing parts. But I haven't thought that they're hard to interpret because of the lacunae on the tablets. But I didn't think they haven't been roughly translated. And then, but there were some, are they Canaanite or there are texts that were discovered in Sinai and Egypt. Then I guess the Israelis are the ones that discovered them. And those are the ones that talk about El and his Ashura. There's two of them, two texts. But then finally Egypt allowed Israeli archaeologists to examine the text. So that's how we have those. And again, they're piecemeal interpretations, but they have been interpreted. Whether AI had anything to do with it, I think these were done previous to using AI.
Listen, it could very well be one of those things that circulated sort of in some of the circles that I travel, which is sort of half news, kernel of fact and a lot of fiction, and it just gets repeated and repeated so often that it actually never happened. It may well be that they fed the text to AI, and AI was just there to fill in the blanks and do a job. I don't know. If it might be something you want to look into in your spare time, if you're still interested in these things, or if you're truly retired, then forget the whole conversation.
We get AI if they can do it, to interpret the linear A text from Creed, but.
I mean, it'd be very interesting because if this giant if now, if this happened either way, and scholars agree that it seems right, it seems to fit, and it has some degree of reliability, that would be a great validation of AI. But like all of us have played with AI and put something in and you get something back that's, part of it makes sense and part of it is just like you walked into a Picasso painting. So, I'm not so sure. The experts assure me I shouldn't worry about AI nearly as much as I do. But I've seen too many science fiction movies. I've read too many science fiction books. I mean, earlier when we were talking about the universe, and I caught myself in my own thoughts when I was saying, if we invited the Anunnaki, they could probably do it. They could probably, run the place better than us. Then I just remember the three-body problem, which I only recently finished the third book. And by the way, I fell into the trap of reading a fourth book, which was sort of authorized fan fiction. Don't be me. Stop at the third book. Don't read the fan fiction. But the dark forest theory, the universe is a dark forest filled with hunters that are trying to kill you and each other. And if they see you first, they're going to kill you. And that's sort of the lesson of the three-body problem, is don't go poking into the dark forest, because you don't know what the, traveler beware, here they be monsters.
Right. I mean, I probably will Google right after we finish AI interpretation of the Levantine text and see what that tells me.
Well, awesome. Well, listen, you're in Europe. It's 6 hours ahead where you are. You've given me over an hour. So is there anything that I didn't allow you to cover? Any questions that got sidetracked? Anything that you didn't talk about that you feel is important in any way, shape, or form?
Not that I can think of. I just want to stress the fluidity and of the Canaanite mythologies and the mythologies of their neighbors, the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and so forth. Even the Hittites. I mean, some of the texts that we have are are Hittite. But
did they have their own gods, or did they sort of share the same gods?
They had their own gods, but they identified some of them with the Akkadian and Babylonian gods. And the Hittites are Indo-European, so they have that basis. And the interaction between the Indo-European and the Semite, you find probably most concretely or obviously through the Hittites. The rest we have to conjecture, but other than what happened with the Persians and releasing the Israelis from captivity in Babylon.
And that was around, what, 400 or 500 AD or Common Era?
Or they'd be sometime before Alexander. So I think about 400 BCE.
Oh, much. I'm off by 1,000 years, okay, or 800 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so much for me. Maybe there was a second time that happened, or maybe I should just stop now.
Time of what?
Was there a second, Babylonian or Persian exile, or I just had the wrong BC versus BCE?
No, the second exile was under the Romans.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. And but that was that was probably 50 BC to 150 AD. I mean, rounding off, obviously. Okay. I'll give myself a not so bad for that. No, but I think I just botched the 800 year or 900 years there entirely. Again, I didn't do very well in religious school growing up. I mean, I probably would do better now, though. I think my teachers wouldn't be happy with my answers. I mean, they'd probably be like, "Dude, you're not in graduate school. You're in Hebrew school for elementary schools, dude. You're not in graduate school trying to get a PhD. Shut up. Yahweh good, everyone else bad." This is a Jewish school. Shush.
Yeah, we should do it all over again. But
well, according to most philosophies, we are, and we have, and we keep will. Including the great philosophers that did the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. All that has happened has happened. All that has happened will happen again, and all that will happen has happened before.
That's Nietzsche's eternal return, but we'll do it over and over and over.
My favorite Nietzsche thing is not a Nietzsche thing at all. It was a Dennis Miller thing from Saturday Night Live, where they said, "God is dead." Says Nietzsche. Nietzsche is dead. God. So, I mean, that was the whole joke. So, it was pretty funny. It was probably a preview of the Dennis Miller that came 15 years later and surprised us all. One way or another. Anyway, Professor York is going to be kind enough. He's going to be joining us, and I think we have it scheduled for 2 or 3 months. From now, we're going to be talking about why is Woden confused with Mercury and Hermes and then Lucifer, and what's all this? Maybe Abraxas will come in, that great rooster-headed Gnostic head of the Archons, maybe not. I don't really know. We'll see. More fascinating and interesting things. By then we may have Mercury 3 ways, because we've already had Carolyn Wallace talk about Mercury, Hermes from a pure Roman Greek perspective. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have George O'Connor on in the interim. But I don't want to brag, but I've got a parade of professors coming, starting with York. Not that we haven't had professors, but in a short span, I don't know when I'm going to drop the shows, but I've got Professor Ed Barnhart coming on about the Incas. I got Professor Robert Spence coming on, talking more about the occult. I've got Professor John White coming on again. He's going to be talking about dragons. We've got you coming on later, in a few months. It's just an embarrassment of riches here on the Garden. I have no idea how this 50-something-year-old that's a tech moron has managed to keep this around and achieve the guests and the quality of the show with a stupid name, which is why I'm changing the name, or maybe have changed the name by the time he hears. Professor, is there a song that you associate with anything we spoke about, or that just is ringing in your head right now that you want to be the outro?
A song.
A song.
There was one, but I can't think of it now. It's going out. What's what was the wartime song? The English gal who sang that. We will. I can't even think of her name now, but
I don't know.
The very famous World War II song. What was that? Can you remember that?
I cannot. I was going with Babylon Sisters by Steely Dan. So, well, if you think of it, email it to me.
All right.
If not, it'll probably be Babylon. So anyway, listen, folks, usually I tell you what you're going to hear. It's going to be a giant surprise, but you're going to hear in a few seconds, so the surprise is over. Professor Michael York coming to us. Are you in France or the Netherlands now?
I'm in London right now.
London, you're always moving. You're so EU. Well, actually, I guess London, you're not EU. You're outcast now. But all right, well,
yes.
Thank you for joining us. Maybe you'll visit our friends in Butte. I appreciate you being on, and I'll see you in a few months.
Oh, we'll meet again. That's what the song is. We'll meet again.
We'll meet again. Okay. You know what? I'll find We Will Meet Again, and from the date, I'll be able to figure out who it is. You got We Will Meet Again. I think it was in Captain America, by the way. All right. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for listening. If you were here by accident because you're a fan of Professor York or somehow you've stumbled upon the show, which is beautiful in and of itself, just subscribe to Garden of Doom. If it's not Garden of Doom, it's Garden of Thought. And you'll get 3 shows for the price of 0. Garden of Doom, which is stuff like this and anything you can dream about, including Battlestar Galactica. Did a deep dive on that with a science journalist and sci-fi author. You get Garden Views, which is maybe a little bit more terrestrial based, legal, tech, business, science, realpolitik. Though I do focus a lot on the law of space and space policy, so it's not entire. Extraterrestrial is there as well. And then you get GOD Presents the Book of Black, which is where me and professional wrestler PJ Black, hence Book of Black, talk to people in and around wrestling about Garden of Doom things. Occasionally it's the Gospel of Thomas, because he was a guest and a co-host twice, and that's Mr. Thomas from Major League Wrestling. For those of you who only follow WWE, PJ Black was, in fact, Justin Gabriel from the Nexus and the Core in WWE for about 5 years. And we have others coming up. So anyway, thanks for your patience. As you're saying, going, I don't care about pro wrestling. You're a good sport, Professor York. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. See you next time on The Garden.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know where.